Hi, friends. I'm Pastor Jack Mantrick, pastor at Central United Methodist Church right here in Waterford, Michigan. We are moving forward into the new year with the questions of who we are and why we are, and answering those who and why questions of our lives so that we may know how we can make some lasting changes and discover what it is that God would want of us in terms of what we can be involved with in terms of ministry, in terms of the work that we do in the world, in terms of our relationships. All those things really matter. We here at Central Church, it was pre-COVID and then into COVID, so about 4 years ago, we started a process called creating a culture of calling, and really trying to help our members figure out how we are called as God's people, how each of us are called to to use certain abilities, to certain circumstances, to heed the call of God in productive and meaningful ways. So let's talk a little bit about that. The sermon from this past Sunday, the message, was about trying to understand how Paul would answer the question of why I am a Christ follower. Why do I follow Christ? And we had several answers that we considered. One would be because I've been called by God. That's important because we have this call upon our lives, and we seek to be the people that God has called us to be. We've spent a lot of time in this church talking about what it means to be called by God to certain circumstances, to certain ministries, to use certain talents of ours. And Paul would have said, I'm called because I have been called by God. That is why I'm a Christ follower. Another answer he would have is because I believe there is meaning behind my life's circumstances. Now, remember, Paul was writing this letter from a prison cell in Ephesus. And so he is in prison. He believes he is in prison because of his ministry and outreach to the non-Jewish population, the Gentiles, and that he is asking for for prayers. He's asking for understanding, but he believes that he is right where he needs to be, that he is a prisoner for Christ, for the sake of you Gentiles, he says. So Paul, immediately in our passage, identifies himself as an apostle of Jesus Christ by the will of God. So he really believes that he is called by God to be an apostle, to bring the good news of Jesus Christ specifically to the non-Jewish people, the Gentile world. Now, Paul had an incredible call story. You might remember it. He was walking on the road to Damascus, and a great strike of lightning came down upon him. It blinded him, threw him to the ground. He was blinded for several days. A person needed to come and pray over him so that he would regain his sight. And it's just been really interesting how Paul then lived his life in response to that great call, that great event in his life. Now, I did not have such a calling in my life. My call was maybe more gradual. I had a pastor all through my high school years that said, you ought to be a pastor. You ought to be a pastor. You ought to be a pastor. It was like a broken record. And by golly, by the time I was in college, actually studying for my first biology exam, I just said, I am miserable doing this. It's not that I couldn't learn, that the biology was particularly gruesome, but it just wasn't what I wanted to be. And so I talked to my pastor. I spoke to him on my Thanksgiving break, and before you knew it, I was on my road, the journey toward ordination, my first year of college. So after college, then comes your 3 years of seminary. So it's really been an interesting journey. I've now been in full-time ministry for nearly 40 years, and it's been a wonderful experience for me. And the Lord has blessed me richly. So I want you to think about what it means to be called by God, and I want you to think about how the circumstances of your life shapes that call. Is it because you've garnered certain skills during your lifetime? Perhaps you play a musical instrument. You have some abilities that you want to think about. Perhaps you've been in circumstances which brought forth a nurturing or caring uh, uh, attribute of your life, that maybe you had to care for a parent, and you learned that you were very blessed in wanting to do that, and you were a very good caregiver. What circumstances have allowed you to recognize your talents, your gifts, and how does that connect with your call that God has placed upon your life to make a difference in this world by sharing the love of Christ in the world? So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about those followers of Christ that you've read about, both in the scriptures, perhaps in books, and people that you know. What is it that inspires you by them? How would you like to live your life more like they do, so that you are feeling connected to a calling and connected to the circumstances of your life? Two great answers to the question of why am I a Christ follower? Because I am called, and because I believe there is meaning in my life's circumstances. So what are your life circumstances that connects with your call to be in ministry? I want you to think about that today. Pray about it. And I'll look forward to talking to you tomorrow. God bless.